Hey guys, welcome to the Shrewsbury Biscuit podcast. I'm Alex Whiteley, and the Biscuiteer joining me today is Max. How are you?
Hello, very, very good, thank you.
Yeah, quite a full day of it today, haven't we?
Absolutely.
I'm enjoying this.
Yes.
I just released a YouTube little video thing, just explaining that. I always complain that I'm busy, I'm doing too much, but in essence, I'm in my element, speaking to so many different people. And today we bring to you someone I found fascinating, introduced to me by Dean Harris, who's the High Sheriff. Phill Gittins, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Alex and Max, for the invitation. Looking forward to having a conversation with you all.
Yeah, it's going to be really good talking to you because, first of all, can you explain to our listeners what it is you do and what we're going to be talking about today? Because it is an interesting subject. It's a subject that has... the way you described it earlier, Max, was it has a danger of it can be misinterpreted, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So explain to people what you do. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for starting off a nice, easy question there, Alex. Okay. So what do I do? It depends what day of the week we're talking about because I wear various hats, right? But I think the reason for being here today is to talk about a new initiative that we're looking to bring to Shropshire, which focuses on training young people and professionals working with them to be peace builders. Okay, so and this might be linked to, the confusion around, well, what does that involve? What's peace building all about, right? Because people tend to think of... kind of peace work happening out there in other countries. So if you look at the UK government, they spend a lot of money sending to other countries to train them around peace building initiatives, to train them around how to reduce violence, to train them around and support them around conflict and things like this. So millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds go into international development and peace building projects out there. So then you might raise the question, well, why is it of interest, here in the UK? Why should it be of interest? Well, I think there's many different reasons for that, and we can obviously explore them a little bit here. But if we start from the idea that every single person on the planet, bar none, experiences conflict.
Absolutely. We were just talking about, just set ourselves up for the interview. Me and Max were just talking about what we're going to talk about in this interview. And I think now more than ever, we need people like yourselves because... there is a lot of conflict out there, isn't there? Whether it's social media about politics, whether it's something to do with the COVID-19, whether it's to do with conspiracy theories, Black Lives Matter, whatever's going on at the moment. It's just raw, arguments and opinions, and sometimes can get very heated and sometimes a very toxic place to be, right?
Exactly. So you're right. Yes, conflict is everywhere. And the important thing, though, is to remember that conflict doesn't always have to be violent, right? So these are things that people learn on peace-building courses, and what we're going to be introducing to Shropshire is that conflict is part of everyday life, but violent conflict doesn't need to be. So you can have conflict with yourself, you can have conflict with other people in communities, you can have conflict with other countries, and you can also have conflict against the environment as well, okay? So the issue is not that conflict takes place. The challenge and opportunity is how do we transform the conflict that always takes place so that we resolve the conflict or transform the conflict so that it doesn't take place through violent means. So when we look at violent conflict around the world, okay, violent conflict diverts attention from all other sustainable development goals. So the UN has the sustainable development goals, and there's 17 of them. And it basically saying that every single country around the planet, every single community on the planet needs to be working towards the 17 sustainable development goals. So there's 17 of them ranging from kind of education, sanitation, environment, mental health, and things like this. Number 16 is peace. So number 16 is a new one. So the Sustainable Development Goals are the goals from 2015 to 2030. Okay, so all schools, all universities, everybody should be kind of educating people around these issues. Their predecessor is something called the Millennium Development Goals, which were from 2000 to 2015. And there was only 8 of them that time. And the UN, the World Bank, and all these big organisations did some research to find out, well, how have all countries done, over these years with regards to these 8 goals that every country is working on? And they actually found, and they concluded from massive research, that what the main reason why most countries were not achieving their targets with regards to education, were not achieving their targets with regards to sanitation, were not achieving their targets with regards to health, is because there's violent conflict in these countries. And when there's violent conflict, the attention goes to stopping that violent conflict and doesn't go towards more productive activities such as education, basic, health, and things like this. So the new Sustainable Development Goals have a Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is just, inclusive, and peaceful societies. But what they're saying, it's just a standalone goal, so there's 17 altogether, but it's number 16. But the General Secretary himself and the UN say, and this is really, really important, there can be no sustainable development without peace. There can be no peace without sustainable development. So if we want to make progress on all the other development goals that we're interested in, that you just mentioned there, around kind of social justice, around climate change, around mental health and things like this, we have to be working on peace.
What do we mean by peace? Because obviously there is when I think of peace, I think of not at war, okay? But at the same time, there is a lot of what you call conflict. I mean, when I think of violent conflict, I mean a lot of what's going on in America, the protests, the police versus the people, all these kind of things. But at the same time, social media bullying over somebody that's gay, or someone that's got mental health issues, or someone that's because of their skin colour. When we talk about peace, is that an umbrella term for all of that?
Again, you're giving me some really good questions here. This is very, very good. And overall, there's no one definition of peace. Why is that? Well, because every human being is different, because we all have our own different understandings of what peace is, right? Peace for you, Alex, peace for you, Matt, will be different, to what I think peace is. And at the same time, a couple of things we're saying. One is that as an academic study or a discipline, peace studies, believe it or not, has been going since about the 1950s. So all around the world, there's more than 400 university programs called, in the broadest terms, peace and conflict studies or conflict analysis or things like this. For example, I did my doctorate and it was called a PhD in international conflict analysis. So there is these programs, but they're mostly at the university level, okay? So there's one thing. So with regards to the question of what is peace, there is someone who's known as kind of the founder of what we call this field of peace studies, and his name is Johan Galton, and I think he must be into his 90s now, and he's still very active, okay? And he come up with this term, and it's quite a tricky term to get your head around, but something called negative peace and positive peace. So I think of this term, negative peace, as necessary but not sufficient. So it's necessary to stop war. It's necessary to stop violence, okay? However, it's not sufficient. So if you and I, let's break it down so that people, can, I'll try and give an example. So if you and I are in a playground, or you and I are in a pub or something like this, right? And we're not fighting physically, or we're not calling each other names, so no physical violence or no psychological violence.
It's a debate.
Yeah, it's a discussion and things like this. So this is a form of negative violence, okay? So negative violence. It's important for us to stop that negative violence, okay? But that doesn't mean that we're friends. That doesn't mean that we have good relationships. That doesn't mean that there's harmony between us, okay? So when we think of the peace-building field, we think of both, and this links again to your question of peace. What is peace? Well, one way of thinking about it is negative peace and positive peace. So negative peace is about stopping the violence, is about stopping the direct violence, is about stopping the psychological violence, where positive peace is about kind of harmonious, healthy relationships and things like this. So you have to work on both. The absence of violence and the presence of social conditions, relationships, okay, that bring about more peaceful change for all. There's one response, but there's no overall answer as to what is peace. And in fact, actually, through studying this quite a lot, there's a lot of the literature that says We know what violence is. We know what conflict is. Peace, in a way, is still kind of a mystery and something we're searching for.
On that topic, I have quite a controversial thing to ask. If everybody's idea of peace is different, and peace isn't a definable thing, is it even an attainable goal?
It's a very good question. Yeah, I love loving these questions, guys. They're brilliant. They're brilliant. So Gandhi once said...
Big fan.
Yeah, go Gandhi. He once said, there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. And what he means by that is peace, in my interpretation, is both a means and an end. I think it's an end in terms of every single person on the planet should be reaching for their own version of peace.
Yes.
Okay. But the thing is, if we look at Hitler, if we look at, Colombia, and, who's in charge in Bolivia and other places that I've worked and things like this, it could be argued that every single person wants peace on the planet. Hitler wanted peace on the planet, but Hitler wanted peace in his own terms. Yes. Okay, so here comes the challenge. How do we bring about peace in a way that is, going back to Gandhi as well, kind of truthful and fair to all involved? So linking as well back to Alex's question before, what is peace? There's people that talk about it, and I spoke about it also in my research and things like this. Maybe we shouldn't just be searching for one piece. Maybe we should be searching for many pieces. And when we look at what peace programming should look like, let's think about training young people, training communities, youth workers. My work that I've done in Colombia or other South American countries or South Sudan would look different to what it would look like in Shropshire, and we can talk about that, what the difference be. But that's another great question. Thank you for that good question.
What was the turning point in Colombia when it came to everybody down in arms and sort of trying to talk about the differences? I mean, this war raged for 75 years, something crazy like that. It was a really long war, civil war that the world just didn't seem to know about, unless you're from Colombia, and it was what they just couldn't. They couldn't agree with one another, so the war went on for so long. Where was the turning point with that?
There's no one turning point, and like this is in most things with regards to the peace process, and I'll put it out there, in no way can I class myself as an expert on Colombia. People from Colombia are the experts on Colombia, right? So here's what I would say from studying and working in many different countries and looking at what it takes to bring about peace in different places, is that the role of civil society, that's you and I, is really, really important. So in the past, when you look at the United Nations, their mandate, and they were set up to, and this is their mission, to stop the scourge of war, to save future generations from the scourge of war. But in the past, when the United Nations was set up, it was this idea of kind of governments have this mission of making their citizens more peaceful and protecting people and things like this. Things have changed now. So that's in a way looking at top down. So the government will, decide what peace should look like and things like this. That's really changed now. There's now a better understanding that it should come from the bottom up, so that's people like you and I should be working for peace.
With grassroots level, right?
Grassroots level, exactly. So that's the language that we'd use. So grassroots level, bottom up, and then there's the middle level, which would be things like universities or think tanks and things like this, and the government. Every single level has a role to play in bringing about peace. So while the governments might be, and government and FARC, and it's much more complicated than the government and FARC, by the way, there's lots more things going on. While they were having discussions for many years, it's no peace agreement's ever going to be sustainable unless you involve most of the community, most of the civil society. So I think one of the breakthroughs would have been getting more people involved, and actually another kind of universal truth that we're finding, that most countries in the world are more peaceful when women are in leadership positions, or women are in kind of decision making and influencing what's going on. So that is another important factor. The peace agreement, I can tell you now, in terms of most other peace agreements around the world, is really well known for being inclusive and including different actors in this work. So there's some ideas, but it's definitely not the overall kind of answer. There's many different perspectives.
I mean, the reason why I brought it up, I mean, apart from the fact we had Gwen Burney who did a talk, who's Darwin's great granddaughter. She's done a lot of work over in Colombia with the FARC, and she did a talk at the Unitarian Church a couple of years ago. And we recorded that, we streamed it across the world, and people really enjoyed hearing her talk. But the reason why I ask is because that is one of those burning conflicts that's happened for so long. And how do you solve a problem like that? You know, not necessarily about Colombia, but about that kind of situation. I mean, there's stuff going on in Syria now that I hope doesn't, but could go on for decades. I mean, it's how do you solve a problem like that? You know,
it's an ongoing, another great question. I mean, another way of looking at it is that you're never going to solve the conflict. So let me just explain that. Okay, because conflict's part of everyday life, there's always going to be conflicts, right? So the best that you can do is kind of manage it or transform the situation in the sense that, okay, when the next conflict comes up, we'll be in a better position to kind of, transform that conflict. So there's different ways of looking at, and these are different theories of,
And in some ways you can use the conflict to kind of better your technological advances, better society.
Like a model.
Well, that's a really good point, because when people conflate or get this idea of conflict and violence being the same thing, they're not the same thing, right? So I've lived for more than 5 years on the ground in South America. I'm telling you now, they need conflict. They've told me we need conflict, but we don't need violent conflict. We need conflict because we've had dictators in place for many years. Without having our conflict, then it would still remain the status quo. So there's a great saying, it links to what you just said, which was really good. We use conflict as a motor of change to bring about positive change. So don't think about conflict as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Conflict is. The most important thing is how you learn to deal with that. So with that in mind, and this will link to kind of the initiative we're looking to make available to Shropshire. When we all want to do something, let's say, for example, a vocation in life, right? We want to become an engineer, or we want to become someone who does a studio and does podcasts and things like that, yeah? Or we want to become a musician, or we want to, teach in a university. What do? We learn the skills. We study. We spend loads and loads of times preparing to develop these skills, yeah? The same, or let's think of a basketball player, a footballer. What do? They spend hours and hours and hours training, researching. Here's the issue. Young people, and generally people in general, are not learning peace building skills. So if they're not learning them, then when they have these inevitable conflicts that happen in their life, they're not going to know how to respond to a conflict instead, constructively. So they're going to hit people, or they're going to self-harm. Or
that's absolutely how I used to react in my teenage years. The first thing I would do if something didn't agree with somebody would just be to punch. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't, just punch, and it's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And
worst way to deal with things.
I thank you for kind of sharing that honestly. Me too. I mean, I'm standing here and I've been fortunate to do many things. I left school with no qualifications. I left school, I was dyslexic. I'll share this now with you. I was asked to kind of leave school a few times.
I can relate to that.
Because I used to get into things like that as well. Because I didn't have the skills, because I didn't know how to respond to these conflicts better.
But I feel like it's the internal conflicts that we must deal with ourselves to then better our character, right?
Yeah, well, if you think of violence being violence is one, if not the biggest killer of young men on the planet, right? And a lot of the reason for that is because of self-harm and because violence, inflicted on oneself. So people need the skills, people need the support to kind of deal with these issues that, that affect them. So, and if they don't, then the issues are going to get worse in themselves, and they're going to do something to themselves, potentially violent, or they're going to do, violence outside to other people.
Sure. One thing you speak about, Phil, on another podcast I've listened to where you feature, was putting knowledge into action. And so a lot of what you're going to do in Shropshire, I believe, is going to be centred around that, right?
That's the idea. Is this a good chance, a good opportunity to kind of introduce the idea of what we're looking to do?
Yeah.
Okay, so what... And in order to do that, it might be interesting thinking about, well, where did this idea come from, right? So as I've mentioned, I've been living abroad in many different countries, doing this work in many different places, right? And I come back to Oswestry, Shropshire, so I'm a local lad. I come back recently, and then many of my youth work colleagues, I used to work for the Shropshire County Council. I mean, I did my degree and diplomas in youth and community work and therapy. I come back, I met up with loads of my wonderful, so if they're listening, shout out, youth worker buddies across Shropshire, and they said, that is so cool what you've been doing, you should do that here. And then I started thinking, I'm not too sure kind of Shropshire's kind of Colombia or Bolivia or Argentina or South Sudan or Turkey and things like this, or the other places I've lived and worked and things like this. But then I started listening to people more, and then I started, being the person that I am, I started looking into it, researching, increasing levels of violence, increasing concerns around county lines, increasing worries around mental health. The situation's getting worse, it seems. With these increasing issues is a decrease in youth service support, is a decrease, in the provisions that are there to kind of help young people with these issues. So
it's a great observation, man. I can, totally relate to it, and I can see it.
I first and foremost, I care about where I'm from.
Yes.
So I'm doing it first and foremost from the heart, not from the head of doing this, all this work out there. I care and I'm concerned. So I started and I did a community assessment. I met Shropshire County Council, I met the mayor, I met town councillors, I met heads of youth service and things like this around Shropshire. And they, basically said, there definitely isn't anything like that around here, and there definitely is a need for it. So I made the decision, rather than going to London to take up a leadership role in an NGO in London, to stay around Shropshire, because I want to try and contribute to making a difference. No one can do everything. So we're here as a collaboration, and it's a shout out to work in collaboration with other people. So the organisation that we're looking at developing, and it's been set up now as a community interest company, is called Generations for Change. And I'll say a little bit about what does that mean. Generations means that present generation, future generation. Generation means children, young people, older generations, all need to learn the skills of positive change making, and that includes peace building.
And then they can start having those conversations in the home.
Exactly. That's the idea. So although we start with children and young people, we must include other people. And I'll say something quite controversial here. I think actually sometimes the adults can be more of the problem than actually part of the solution, in a sense that if you've got your children and your young people looking up to the adults who, let's say, perhaps are not working or causing violence themselves or having these issues, and this is no way a judgment. So people listening, it's no way a judgment to you, because it's the same for me. I did not learn those skills either from growing up in Shropshire. So part of the work needs to look at training professionals and adults working with young people as well, about how to support them to become peace builders, about how to support them to become positive change makers. So then one question you might have, well, okay, sounds good. Then going back to your question, Max, great question. How do you put this knowledge into action? What does it look like? So the organisation will have a focus on a core mission, helping more people to become more effective change makers. That's it. More people to become more effective change makers, with a focus on three things. And three areas of change making which are really, really important right now. Peace, because of the reasons that we've discussed. Mental health, very, very big issue. Well-being. I'm a therapist, so I should really work in that area as well. And the final one, climate change. Massive, massive, massive interest around the world around climate change. And fair play to young people around the world, they're really stepping up with regards to climate change.
I've done a couple of shows where we talked about intergenerational conflict. There you go, intergenerational conflict. And we're talking about generation, the latest one, Generation Z. A lot of care about their environment. That seems to be a big thing. I think it's something beautiful where this world has been almost torn apart, all these chemicals put in the air, the plastics in the ocean, and it's the young minds that want that to be fixed. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, well, climate change is a massive thing, because without the planet, probably the fact is the planet will keep going. We won't, right? So we need to work on the planet in order for us to have, to continue. But here's some things which, and with my other hat on, because I work for an organisation in the US, which is called World Beyond War. So we're lucky that we work in and have membership 175 countries. So we're working all around the world, right? And we've just done a course called War in the Environment. So it looks at the kind of interlinkages and the combination between war and the environment. Lots of people around the world, Extinction Rebellion, shout out to them doing some amazing work. Not all understand how big a role war plays in climate change. So let me just give you one example. The biggest polluter on the whole planet, the US military. So people think that, okay, we'll do a little bit in terms of plastic and stuff like this, at home. Yes, it makes a difference. Yes, it makes a difference. In order to look at bigger change, we have to tackle the biggest thing that gets in the way of, these issues, such as the military. How is it? Here's some other kind of statistics for you. How is it that we spend $2 trillion a year preparing for war or on war, where estimates think that it would cost $30 billion to end starvation on the planet, right? So put that in. So, and the thing is, I'll do a shout out, US are very much to blame.
Goosebumps from that.
Exactly.
Wow.
So how is that the case that, $2 trillion spent on that when it would cost 30 billion estimates, to kind of end poverty and starvation? And the US are at least half to blame for this, because they account for at least half of that 2 trillion.
War is an industry, isn't it? We're just saying that war is an industry that generates a lot of money and a lot of. When you talk about capitalism, communism, countries of differing opinions to yours, that could sort of make people in your country think a bit differently. That's what that's all about. It's not right. It's not right at all. Like you said, if we could learn how to solve these problems by talking about them, that's where the future lies, right?
Yeah,
that's what we'd like to see.
It's like it's an industry, but it seems to be perpetuated by people who aren't educated in peace management, right?
It is an industry, and here's the other thing: is that, and yes, it does make money for some. There's research, and actually, I'll do a plug now. The book that I've just edited, called "A Global Security System: An Alternative to War," get it right now on Amazon. Looks at an analysis of, well, okay, people are saying, war is, economy and brings in money and things like this. It does for some, but overall, it's detrimental to the economy because of the reason we just said. In terms of 2 trillion, it makes some people money, and then you've got people who I know, that are in the military and say, well, it kind of pays my salary and things like this. There's been comparative analysis done in terms of, well, if we spend this much on a soldier, for example, one piece of research says that it costs, I think it was $500,000 to train a soldier, right?
Wow.
$500,000.
Wow.
Okay, where it would cost about 50,000 to train a peace worker. Okay, so, and you might think, well, is this happening? Yes, there's peace workers in many different countries around the world that actually go in without their arms and go in and do what you're saying, Alex, in terms of facilitating this dialogue as well. Dialogue's important, but dialogue is not, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So going back to your question earlier about this knowledge in action, people need, and I can link this to the focus of Generations for Change, if we can do that. I think in order to bring about positive change, we need work in 3 areas. One, we need research. So we need to find out, what are some of the issues in our community? What are the things that people care about? What are the gaps that exist? Right? And then with that, you can think, okay, so how can we develop a strategy that responds to what people care about, that responds to the gaps, that gives people what they need? Not just, what Phill thinks or what other people think. Let's listen to the people, right? So then first part, research, second part, education. So it trains them to, be peace builders. And what does that mean? Well, it trains them to understand different forms of conflict. It trains them to understand different forms of violence. It trains them in something called non-violent communication, which is about how do we be in relationship. It sounds quite sensitive here. How do we be in relationship with ourselves and others in more compassionate, understanding, honest ways? And then the education would also train them to do their own projects. So when we look at, and this is a big concern that I have with a lot of youth work, not just in Shropshire, but in many other places that I've been, most of the focus is on kind of looking at young people as problems to be solved. rather than looking at them as potential solutions to the problems, right? This is not just me. There was a massive
There
research.
is something I heard, and I feel like it's important that I mention it. We are not our problems, but we are the solution to our problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are not the problems. We are the solutions to the problems, or perhaps both. We are, both part of the problems and the solutions to the problems. So there was in the context of peace and youth work, there was some research done recently by the United Nations, and it consulted over, I think, 4,000 young people from many different countries, more than 40, 45, and asked them about, their concerns about violence, conflict, and peace and things like this. The research found that this is the case. Far too many countries around the world are looking at young people as problems and not utilising
that. Doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, it doesn't utilise...
Untapped potential, right?
Exactly, and that's part of the language they use. So young people are kind of untapped potential. And they're still going to keep being untapped potential unless we train them to be peace builders, right? So here we go to this Generation for Change model. So research, education, and knowledge in action. So how do you do that? Well, what we do is that we support the young people to do their own projects in the area of peace, climate change, and mental health. This is new. It's brand new for Shropshire, but it's not new for me. I've overseen about 30 of these in many different countries, right? So it's tried and tested. Although it's very new for Shropshire, and I understand talking about peace, I put my hands up, it's very new for Shropshire. So in order to do this, this is why very fortunate that, I've reached out. So shout out, to the High Sheriff, Dean Harris. Yeah. Amazing support, and really understands the need for this. Other people at Shropshire County Council, I've got people writing to me from Telford, from other schools are saying, can we do this next? We're starting off with one project. We've got the money, thanks to a partnership. So it'll be Generations for Change working in collaboration with Oswestry Town Council, Landau, who's a charity, and the Marchers School. So the Marchers School is the biggest academy school across Shropshire, who have shown wonderful leadership and basically said, we'd love this to be brought to our school. So what we're doing is what we're calling a whole school inspired approach, in the sense that over 6 months, we'll be training, hopefully, all of the students and all of the teachers. There's over 1,200 students at the Marchers, and I think there's over 100 teachers as well. So we're in this process now of doing that. We're going to do some research in October to find out what they want to learn, and then we'll design the project, which will involve starting with the teachers, actually, and it will train them. So shout out if people are interested, because it's not just for the teachers at Marchers. It's for youth workers, social workers, so trained youth workers, social workers, police officers, professors, lecturers, etc. in other places. Trains them in the basics of peace building, but then trains them to kind of support young people to be peace builders. Then in November, the teachers will then go and teach their own classes across the whole school. And then the idea is, at the end of November, there's something called Futures Week, where the school have an opportunity to dedicate that week to a particular theme. And they're dedicating it this year to a culture of peace. In fact, actually, they're dedicating, and this is wonderful leadership from the Marchers, they're dedicating the whole semester to a culture of peace. So hats off to, Marchers for leadership. They're dedicating the whole semester to this culture of peace, and this Futures Week to a culture of peace. And what we'll be doing is having two-day workshops specifically for one for year 9 and one for year 10, which takes them through a process of understanding what peace is, developing some skills to resolve conflict, understand violence, and then envision or design their own peace projects or social action projects. And again, they decide what those projects will be focused on. So we're in that process now. It's quite exciting.
And I guess fundamentally it's just compassion within the community.
And it's important as well. I mean, I spoke to you on email and with Dean Harris as well. Like, it's about time. It is about time that we started teaching a bit of compassion and how not to be horrible, basically, because a lot of there are people that are indoctrinated to lean a certain way, whether it's far right, whether it's to be anti-gay, whether it's these social issues that we've been talking about. So I'm very optimistic about this. I think you're going to do a great job. But at the same time, I feel like there's a danger of you going through all this hard work and doing these amazing things for these kids to go back and then just be pushed back into that direction.
My issue is video games. So they're going to learn all about peace management and all these wonderful things that you're going to teach them and how they can implement it in their lives, but then they're going to go home and play Call of Duty and shoot loads of people,
Yeah,
that's an issue I have.
Yeah. Okay. So we go into this not naive in the sense that everyone's going to walk out of Gandhi. That's not the case. But if more people can walk out and with this understanding that actually I can, and again Gandhi again, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah,
if people can walk out
that.
of the training, in this sense of. When I've been talking to other youth workers as well, and that work with lots of young people across Shropshire, they've said, Phil, we just need something new to inspire young people around here. You're not going to inspire all of them, but you might get some of them. And I'm not naive. I'm a youth worker. I understand how difficult it is, to work with young people. So we want to offer opportunities. Not everyone will take them up. I'm not saying everybody wants to be a professional peace builder. That's fine. But I think some of us can learn some skills to help us be compassionate in our relationships with other people. So when I was talking to the school about this at Marches, and they said they didn't use the word compassion, but they used tolerance, and it kind of is similar areas. So how do we help young people or other people in general be more tolerant, be more compassionate with other people? And again, I think there's something there about, supporting them, capacity building to do that as well. So if we look at, with this particular project in the Marches, if we look at, they'll actually go and do their projects, and then the end goal is to present their projects. Maybe we can come back with young people and talk about these projects. The idea is to come back, is to do the projects, and then we present the projects to the community. So I just think of one that I did recently. I was in Argentina for 6 months. They presented twice, actually, and there was 800 people at that event. So you're talking the mayor of the whole district, the superintendent of the education system, etc. A wonderful opportunity for young people to step up and say, look, stop looking at me as a problem, start supporting me and investing in me. Yeah. And when I say investing, I mean investing. There is not enough investment in terms of financial investment, but also human investment. Time in terms of supporting young people to really have the best chance that they can of kind of fulfilling their potential, but fulfilling their potential in a way.
Realising themselves,
and also in a way that kind of does something to the community as well, because young people, they care when you speak to them. They're concerned, they want to make a difference, but they don't know how. Yes. So let's give them some opportunities. And if one of them is the peace building, what we're looking at, if another one is another service that anyone else is offering, that's fine for me. I'm here because I care. I don't need to do this organisation in Shropshire. I have a wonderful job, with the other organisation that I lead their education department. But I'm doing this because I first and foremost care and want to contribute something.
Now, we live in the world of unbridled narcissism. When it comes to things like Snapchat, Instagram, it's all about me. It's all about me and my bubble. I think the bubble is a perfect example of why people don't care about these things. Is because as long as they've got what they need, it's absolutely fine. How do you combat that? How do you take someone out of that bubble?
Yeah, that's another good. Some great questions here today.
It's what I do.
Let me go back to your point earlier about also I can answer that question and go back to your point earlier, which I think was really good about Colombia, and not many people know about what's going on in Colombia and things like this. So, for example, when we look at what if I say to you two, what is one of the most difficult things or the most tragic thing that has happened related to peace in the last 20 years, and for example there was a bit of an anniversary yesterday which might give you a bit of a clue, what would you say?
9/11, isn't it?
9/11
today,
right?
Isn't it? It's 11 today, yeah.
Oh, it's today.
It's
okay,
today,
that was me thinking. Yeah. Okay, so 9/11. Okay, so terrible. Totally terrible. How many people died there?
5,500, wasn't it?
I think it was about 3,000, right? So let's think about other things that have happened in the world, right? So when we look at, let's say, World War II, Okay, and then if you ask, and I've done this, I've worked with kind of students in university and things like this. So I've asked them how many people died in 9/11, and they generally know 3,000 to 5,000 and things like this. And I'll say, okay, let's think about like World War II, right, in the Soviet Union, and let's say the US, for example, because it was in the US at the time. How many people died in World War II that were from the US? Generally, people say, I don't know, maybe 80, 90,000 or something, right? And then when you look at it, it was about 390,000, for example. But then you ask them, okay, let's think about World War II. How many people from the Soviet Union died, right? And then they'll say something like, I don't know, round about the same. And then the research shows 27 million.
Yes. That was the Gulag, million. Right? Was that in part due to the Gulag?
I mean, there's loads of different factors there. But think about that. Yeah. Think about that, in terms of comparisons, and then
it's very much brushed under the carpet.
Brushed under the carpet, and then the reason why I'm saying this is that to help kind of young people make sense of what does that mean. 27 million people. I say things like, okay, think about 9/11, but think about it happening every single day for 24 years.
Yes, exactly.
So based on 9/11, right, 3,000, gosh, I'm just thinking about that, like goosebumps, After that happened, the US went and invaded like 2 different countries based on that, right, for 3,000 people. The Soviet Union, 20, all these millions and millions of people. So the reason why I'm saying this is that I think you're right. People don't kind of look outside their bubble.
Yeah.
Part of that is people do need to take some responsibility for that themselves, but they also need to have a kind of a critical view on the media as well. For example, we don't tend to get media that says, oh, by the way, Alex and Max and Phil were peaceful today in Shropshire.
No, totally, yeah.
What they get is, this has happened in this country, and we don't hear it. Why don't we hear about the peace heroes? Why don't we, start hearing more about the peace heroes than kind of,
It's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you as well. Is local newspapers, not mentioning any names, will do that. They'll be like, Extinction Rebellion have closed a bridge because and then all you get is the certain demographic.
Right?
Bet they drove there. Or what magic carpet did they fly in? And all these kind of questions. It's just the stories that are designed to just poke at people.
Yes. Well, there's an actual field called peace journalism, by the way, which is kind of critiquing this kind of journalism that looks at all the bad things, that only looks at one perspective, and I think one of the best things we could do as youth workers or educators is to provide information and a platform where, let's say, young people make informed decisions. If they're just getting one view from the media, from a certain kind of newspaper or from a certain kind of news channel, then it's like that's all they see, right? So what we need to do is provide young people, and not all young people, kind of more information or different information or balanced information where they can make informed decisions. The thing is, I think we know no one's going to change anybody else. And this does relate to what we've kind of been talking about. It's not up to us to change other people. So that's not your role as a youth worker or a human being to change other people. All you can do is kind of be the best person you want to be for yourself and help people have more information so that they can make informed decisions for themselves, right? So this is where the issue from at the heart of my belief about youth work is that it's about working with young people. It's about them making decisions for themselves. It's about providing them with information for themselves. But it's also a chance for them to decide whether they want to kind of engage with that as well and say yes or no.
Very much empowering young people.
That's the idea. I mean, that's the idea. I mean, there's one way of saying, and I think that word empowering is interesting. One way of saying, we empower young people, and I've seen this, I'm not the biggest fan of that. What I would say is we provide an environment where young people can become empowered.
Sure.
So, it's a bit of a difference.
Absolutely.
There.
Yeah.
In the sense that we facilitate an environment.
It's a more directed approach. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is very brave, especially with today's current climate. There is a lot of hate out there at the moment. One of my most trusted peers, and one of the people I respect the most is Simon Bell, local author he's written lots about books about genocide and the rhetoric of hate, and he talks about the sort of rules when it comes to certain rhetorics, and the main demographics towards them, and when you speak of a demographic that big that will lean right for certain reasons, it means that when you are educating these young people, you'll be making a stamp on that demographic. You'll be making a difference, hopefully. Even if the ratio is only a few will go on to learn to do this, you're still making a huge difference that will hopefully be passed on to the next generation, and that's what we need to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. What you say about making a difference, I think every single human being makes a difference. And I think this comes from, is it Jane Goodall, I think, says this? Something like, we all make a difference, decide the difference you want to make. So whatever we do will make a difference. The question is whether we make a good difference or not. And hopefully we can try and support more people to make a positive difference than, a negative difference. I'd love to kind of chat with your buddies, Simon Bell. And actually if people are interested in this, in addition to the Generations for Change work that we're doing in Shropshire with my other hat on, and if people are interested in World War II, we've got a course starting on the 5th of October, and it's called Leaving World War II Behind. And it's actually looking at many people make an argument today and basically say, yes, but we need this war here, and we need this war here because remember about Hitler and stuff like this, right? So they make arguments. So this book is based on my executive director's book. Would you believe he wrote a book in 2 weeks?
Wow.
18 chapters. How crazy is that, right? So my task now is to go through the book and make it into a 6-week course. So we've run 3 6-week courses this year. One is called War Abolition 101, War Abolition 201, War in the Environment. All of the courses have had more than 130 people sign up from all around the world. So you've got people from age 18 to 85 on the program. Amazing, eh? And then people from kind of students right through to doctorates, professors, and then people from, of course, UK, US, but South Sudan, Afghanistan, Cameroon, Burundi, Bolivia, South Korea. So we have a really good mix. So if people are interested, and thinking, I'd really like to know more about this, one way is that they might, be interested in signing up for the course.
I would love to get you, Simon Bell, and Ben Butler, who's doing great work in Telford as well with New Generations Coaching, because he's not attacking county lines. He's trying to teach kids that there's more to life than county lines. That it's actually a bad path to go down. He was actually an enforcer for county lines. He was part of it, and he learnt the hard way. So he's trying to help young people avoid that. He's a fascinating chap.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have a chat with it. And this is part of my kind of issue or interest, let's say, within New Generations for Change, is to look at young people in a different way. There's too much focus on county lines, and I'm not in no way saying it's not important. No. It is. But look at statistically, right? The amount of people that go into county lines, is a tiny percentage. Well, it's not fair on all the other young people then, is it? If all the focus is going on young people, in county lines, what about the young people that want to make a difference, and do something positive? So rather than just stopping county lines, which is necessary, but it's not sufficient, let's stop county lines, and then let's think about how we want young people to be, or how we want to support young people.
And this is very much what he's looking at, because you stop county lines. Yeah, you say county lines are stopped today. Something else will just pop up. Another way to get drugs from one A to B. And this is what I think Ben is looking at, very much like yourself, is teaching people, why not just go to the gym and work on yourself and create a better...
I feel like that comes back to role models. There's not enough role models and father figures in the world.
Yeah.
We really need it.
Yeah. Teaching them, role models to look at, also teaching them to deal with the everyday conflict that comes up, teaching them or supporting them to be more resilient. That's one of the biggest skills that we should be teaching,
sure.
Right? Look right now in terms of COVID, right? How can people kind of respond to the everyday challenges that happen? You're right, Alex. Challenges will always come along. Every single day they'll come along, right? So what are you going to do? We need to stop these challenges. You can't. What you need to do is think, how can we be more resilient?
Embrace the challenge, right?
Embrace the challenge, yeah.
And Dean Harris as well. Dean Harris, for me, is one of the biggest... You'll never find a bigger Dean Harris fan than me. I think she's amazing. I think she teaches young girls that a woman can go out there and be powerful and strong.
Yes.
You know, I said to Dean on the show, she could have gone into office as the High Sheriff and gone, oh, this is a nice office. You know?
No, what?
Yeah, you know what I mean? I'm just going to turn up at fancy events and wave at people. But she was like, no, I'm going to tackle domestic violence. I'm going to tackle drug addiction. I'm going to try and make lives a bit better. And that's what she's done. And she is kicking butt. She really is. I mean, she introduced me to you, you know, so she's got her fingers on the pulse. Absolutely.
Her fingers on the pulse, and she's everywhere. She's like, you know, High Sheriff here today. High Sheriff here. Fair play to her. She's getting out and about. So my hat goes off to her. That's what we need. That's what we need. You know, people that are committed, care, but also as well, and this is important, so committed and care, but also know what they're doing as well. Yeah. Because we can have sometimes people that are really, really committed and that they care, that don't have the skill set to kind of support this as well. So when we're looking at things, we need a mix of three: commitment, you know, they care, and also they have the capacity to kind of do something. And Dean, among many other wonderful people in Shropshire, there's many wonderful people doing wonderful things in Shropshire.
On that
we
note,
need more.
Absolutely. And on that note, Phil, you mentioned Jane Goodall as somebody who's a speaker, perhaps. Are there any other good speakers on YouTube people can go and listen to and get more empowered about peace management?
Yeah, definitely. David Swanson from World Beyond War. You should check him out.
He's got a great podcast.
Great podcast called Talk Nation, and he's had some wonderful people on that. PCDN is another one if people are interested in. PCDN podcast, a wonderful podcast looking at peace builders, social change makers.
That sounds great.
Yeah, they'd be other people to check out if people are interested, but I'm not too sure how we can get in contact. But there'll be quite a lot of talks being done on the 21st of September, which is the International Day of Peace. So I'm speaking at 3, one in India, one in Bolivia, and the other one in Colombia so far.
Wow.
So these are...
And how can people get involved with that and listen to them?
Yeah, that's the thing. We haven't got details yet because I need to plan them. But
Google.
Yeah, if people wanted... I mean, can I put my email address if people wanted to kind of email?
Absolutely,
is that a good idea? So if people are interested, Phill G 2007 at hotmail.co.uk. If people are interested.
Phil with 2 L's, right?
Yeah.
Phil with 2 L's.
Yeah.
Hotmail.co.uk.
.co.uk, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love to get you back on. I want to find out what's going on with Generations for Change and see how the progress, because I think it's really important what you're doing. And like I said, very brave in today's current climate, because there aren't enough people doing this. Role models are important, like you said, Max. And well, I mean, what have you got in America? You got Trump. He's just like, I've got these problems. I'm going to slam my fist on the desk.
Megalomaniac.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'd hate to think that that's the way the world's going. You know, I'd hate to think that. And
it's a minor hiccup, Al. It's going to change.
Oh, hopefully it's not a minor hiccup. It's going to last another 4 years. Because America's a mess.
Think like that.
It'd be good if we could kind of support young people so that we now... So, for example, if I say to you two, right, who do you think of when I say to you, think of a peace role model? Who do you think of?
Wow, immediately it's like Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela?
I'm going to say, this is going to sound like Kevin Smith.
Kevin Smith?
Kevin Smith from Jay and Silent Bob, because he's a guy that I look up to, and he's always like, you can do it, kids. You can do it. Get a mic, get in front of it. You can do it. I believe in you. He smokes a bit of weed. He tells a few fart jokes, but at the same time, he's peaceful with it. He's inclusive with people. And if he sees his fans, he'll give them a hug. That's really daft, but that's my universe.
Yeah, well, that's great, and that's the same in terms of peace. You know, the question, what is peace? You know, when I do this with many different people, I ask them. You know, people come up with different role models they have in mind. Nelson Mandela is a big one. Gandhi, Martin Luther King. You know, and then some people.
John Lennon early as well.
John Lennon. Yeah, people.
Even to some extent, Malcolm X, right? To some extent.
Malcolm X is a really interesting one, and in fact, actually, I've used him a few times when people have asked me, and the reason for that is because
I'm surprised to hear you say that. I'm really glad.
The reason why, and there's a real interesting, because I thought about this quite a lot, is that. When you look at Gandhi, although there is kind of some critiques about him in terms of family life, right? But generally, he kind of always followed this kind of peaceful path. One thing that really interests me is people that have the ability to stop and look at themselves and change, right?
Yeah.
So Malcolm X was violent. You know, he was violent.
Completely.
But what he did later was turn the mirror inwards and change himself for the better. That, for me, is even more impressive than someone just following the straight and narrow. You know, like, I mean, if I speak about myself, for example, I have not always been, 100% peaceful, but I'm trying. And this is, when we talk about a peace builder, it's not as if, okay, right, I've got the qualification now, I'm the peace builder. It's an everyday process every single day. So it's about becoming a peace builder, right? So every single day. So that's why I like Malcolm X. But in terms of the role models, wouldn't it be great if, often when I do this, not many people think of young people as peace builder role models?
Do you think that's because there's not enough humility within young people?
I think because there isn't enough spoke about. I mean, you think of, Malala, and then you've got Greta now, in terms of climate change and things like this. And then you've got Emma Gonzalez in the US around the gun violence issues. Why can't we have kind of a peace? Here's a challenge for people listening. Why don't we come up with our own peace builder role models from Shropshire who are young people?
And why not?
Absolutely.
Why not?
Yeah, I'm well up for that. Challenge yourself. Challenge yourself. If you there was a when they did the Black Lives Matter protests, we were there, weren't we, in Shrewsbury. The young girl that was, I forget her name, and I do apologise because she was fantastic. I spoke to her and I was like, I'd love to get you on the show and talk about what you did today, because she did this socially distanced Black Lives Matter protest in the quarry in Shrewsbury. Everyone was social distance and people just got up and they spoke a few passionate words. No throwing of things, no like going crazy, and it was so moving, it was so passionate. But when I spoke to her, I said, you need to come on the biscuit when you talk about this. She's like, I don't think people will understand. I don't think I'd say the wrong thing, I'd get it wrong, people won't understand. And that's the fear, isn't it? That you can't make a difference.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, thank you for sharing that, because on one hand, that sounds amazing that she stepped up and she did that as well. But then also the fact of, she's questioning herself as well. I think what I would say in terms of, there's not one way to work for peace.
Yes.
There's different ways. And some people will be kind of a front person and kind of be right at the, right in the thick of things. And then some people will take a back, how do you say, like, come to the back and not be a back seat. That's it. Take like a back seat. So there's so many different ways that people can work for peace. So we shouldn't all just look at people in terms of, I'm not loud enough, or I'm not, I'm not this.
It's absolutely going to the same funnel though, isn't it? Ultimately.
We're all working for the same thing.
Yes.
When you look at like successful teams are built up of people that bring different skill sets, right? So that's the same in terms of peace building. You've got people who are kind of...
Great analogy.
Looking at being the front runner. You've got people that are good at organisation. You've got people that are troublemakers and kind of, have you ever been in teams where people have gone, I don't really kind of agree with that. What about this? And stuff like that. Some people look at them and think, what a pain in the butt, right? But the truth is we need people like that because they're questioning us and getting us to think.
This is it's good. That's a great way to pull it back to conflict. Conflict is important.
Conflict is important, So, and it's about that kind of working through the conflict, how we go about working through these inevitable conflicts that we have. Yeah. So conflict, part of every single day life. So hopefully what we're looking to do with Generations for Change is trying in some way, some tiny, tiny way to kind of contribute to this work around helping young people to deal with the conflicts that they have in their life, helping them to think about not choosing violence as an option, and to think about peace as a possible option as well. That's the contribution that we're hoping to make. And it is worth underlining that we can't do this on our own. We've got this collaboration that we're speaking about right now with the Marchers, Landau and Oswestry Town Council, but there's many other people that are in contact with us, and we're already in conversations with regards to reaching out. So we've got the cadets who are interested, we've got people from Telford and things like this. But we want to take it slowly. So I am not being naive, with regards to the first project, because it's a first project. We're going to use it as a learning opportunity to learn, to listen, and to hopefully kind of improve for the next project. So this project will be from now until probably February, March, and then we'll look to do another project. So if schools are interested in having a conversation, we'll be looking at the next project probably in March. But we'll obviously have to do the planning and funding and things like that beforehand. So please reach out.
I'd love to bring some microphones. If you've got an event, going on, or you got some sort of training or a presentation, even like you said, 800 people turning up to the one in Argentina. I'd love to be there with some microphones and speak to people, because I think it's really important.
Well, if okay, let me take you up on that offer then.
Yeah.
So if you guys are interested, we're doing this remember this Futures Week thing that we spoke about? It's going to be the last week of November. So I think it's like the first of is it the first, second, third, and fourth of December at the Marches School. And I'm really interested, because I would do most of the facilitating, people coming along and asking the young people to talk in their own words, not with Phill listening, I'll say good things. No, tell us in your own words, what is good for you and what's working for you.
That's great.
Yeah. And finally, do you have a ready-made sort of quick steps on how to deal with conflict? So, I mean, some just quick little bits of advice. If someone's got a conflict in themselves, if they're dealing with a political issue that they just really riles them, and how to deal with that, do you have any quick bits of advice for people?
I'm really loving these questions. These are great.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, that is great. Okay, so here's one of the problems that I see with conflict or problems in general or programs, is that people rush to the solution, right? So something happens and they think, oh, okay, let's do this, to make the situation
Instantly
better.
change it.
Yeah, let's no, we can't do this. Let's change something, right? So it's said that Einstein was asked a question, right? And he was asked a question to kind of solve the world or something like this, and he had 1 hour to solve the world, right? To think about how we would use that 1 hour solving this particular world problem. And you know what he said? I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem, and then 5 minutes defining the solution. Mm-hmm. So let me relate that to your question. The first important thing is to stop and think, what's going on here? So if it's a conflict, let's make it really, really concrete. So if it's a conflict between two friends, yeah? Mm-hmm. Conflict happening. I don't know what the conflict is.
We're back in the pub. Back
in the pub, conflict between two friends. And then so one thing to do is stop and ask yourself, what's going on here? And in order to do that, you ask yourself, what's going on for me? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Yeah. And then you might try, which is, of course, is the hardest thing, to try and put yourself in the shoes of someone else. So then you might think, okay, so what's going on for my partner, my colleague, my friend? Yeah. I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder what they're feeling. Yeah. And then what you might do is say, okay, here's the conflict that I see. This is my perspective. I'm wondering what your perspective is about the situation. So in that way, you've said what you think, and your partner, has also said as well. And then you can listen to what they say, and then you can go, okay, right, it seems as though there's kind of a difference here, or here's the similarities. So start off with some positives. So here's this, the similarities. You think this, and I think this as well. I think where we differ is in this thing here. Yeah, so they're both on the same page. And then you might go on to ask them, okay, so I wonder, where do we want to go with this? What do we want? So it might be like, okay, I'm going to bring in my football team. Okay, we want to go and see Arsenal football team, right? But you're going to pay, and then I'm not too happy with that paying, So then we can kind of try and negotiate and say, well, how about if we kind of negotiate and we pay half or something like this, yeah? So these are the things. So identify what's going on. Let people say how they feel and what they think on both sides, and then try and define a win-win situation. That's what you're looking for. It's not always possible, but try and find a win-win situation.
I once heard that a compromise is a solution where nobody's happy, but that isn't the case necessarily.
Compromise solution where no one's happy. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'll go away and have a think about that one. Yeah, I think that's quite a good one. A compromise where no one's happy. Depends on the situation, I guess. That word compromise in itself is quite a tricky one, isn't it, I think? So I don't know. It's a good point. Don't have the answer on it. And again, what I've said today, I'll say this, no one has the universal truth on anything. Yeah. We're just here learning together, so I'm sharing a perspective. I'm not saying it's the right perspective. I'm just sharing a perspective. What I want to hope and hopefully leave myself open to, is that I'm humble to looking and learning from other people. So that's what I'm interested in.
And I think that's what's important, is the fact that you've still got lessons to learn. Yeah, and you're admitting that, sure, which I think
humbling,
everybody needs to take a page from. That everybody's right. Always right about everything.
Well, that's the kind of the curse of knowledge, is that where people have gone and done other things, they might come back and think, oh, it should be like this here, but we're in a different place. So this is why
situational.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like context specific, right? So this is why I'm interested in, should we be using that word peace in Shropshire, seem as though it is brand new?
Sure.
Or should we be calling it something else? Or, I'm the person I am is that I really love asking questions and listening to people, to what they think. Sometimes my wife kind of shouts at me and says, Phil, stop asking everyone, loads of different questions, but that's
how you broaden your horizon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, using the word peace in Shropshire is rewiring people to believe, or to not to believe, should I say, that peace is all hippies and free love, because that is one of the biggest problem. I feel like when it comes to the older generation, I'm not saying the B word, but the older generation, it's all hippies and it's not. It is about conflict, and it's about listening to people's problems.
But that's a valid point, though. When people say, is it hippies? And I can share with you now a little story. I won't say the person because I haven't spoken to them, but they said when they were asking me about the organisation, about the work we're doing, they said, let me just check this with you. Is it kind of like hippies, or is it kind of religious? And I said, far from religious and far from a hippie, but it's a really good point that you brought up, and I'm curious why you're thinking that, And then she said, because of that, I said, yeah, that is the truth, because we think of kind of things out there we don't understand, but although it's been recognised now by the United Nations, it's been recognised. I can tell you now as well that the youth sector, the Council of Europe youth sector, which is the people that look after all of the youth work across Europe, or inform the youth work, they've got as 2 of their 3 priorities for the next 2 years. One is inclusive and peaceful societies. So they recognise that, listen, youth work really needs to change what they're doing and engage young people in inclusive and peaceful societies. So it's not just me coming in and saying, look, I think we should look at this. It's been recognised, right at the UN global level, and now right at the kind of, the European level.
Fantastic. Have you got any more questions?
Well, we could go for a long time.
I could speak to you for hours.
But I will just quickly say there's more and more children, it seems, being brought up in hostile environments as a result of, whatever it is happening in the world, whether it's corona or whatever else.
Yeah, well, on that, think about the situation that we're in right now. When this comes out, we've got COVID, right? So what happens is that sometimes the house is the most dangerous place for people to be in.
There's no respite even.
And there's no respite,
Absolutely.
right? So with Dean Harris and others, they're doing all the great work around, domestic violence. That is another issue to look at, How's that going to change? How do we... So it's not just about focusing on the young people. It's about the parents, the professionals that are working with young people. How do we train them, to respond to conflict better and to?
That's a great road, isn't it?
So that's something that I'm particularly interested in. We're interested in generational
Incredible work,
change.
Phil.
So thank you. It's a collaborative effort. We're at the start. We're here to learn and we're here to listen. So that's the process that we're in.
I'm going to cheat here and say I'd love to speak to you more. So I'd like to offer you an invite to USOC to come on my other show. There we go. I can speak to you even longer because I feel like you're right, Max. We could sit here for 2 hours and speak to you about this. You've been a fantastic. I feel so honoured to have spoken to you. Really, genuinely.
I really do. Yeah. Summed it up nicely.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you on behalf of Shropshire, and not just Shropshire, the UK, because I feel like this is what I said when I talked about bringing you on the show was, okay, it's not from Shrewsbury, but whatever you're doing is important to the county, and so thank you.
Thank you. Can I just do a shout out to both of you two as well, because this is really important to get ideas out there, and what you're doing is really important for getting ideas out there, for being innovative, for talking about things that are not always spoke about, so for you in itself, you to yourself showing great leadership by inviting me. So I want to say thank you for the invitation, and also a shout out Dean Harris for connecting us. What a wonderful connector, and hopefully the start of a conversation, a collaboration, etc. with you also. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. That was really nice. Thank you. Would you like to tell people where they can find you, the websites, how they can help?
Yes. So Generations for Change, we're in the process of setting up a website. I think the best thing to do is you could find me on Facebook. If you put in, I've got two. So one is Dr. Phill Gittins and the other one is Phill Gittins on Facebook. You can email me, as I've explained before. So Phill, PHILLG, 2007 at hotmail.co.uk. We're in the process of setting up email addresses. I think that you could find me on LinkedIn as well, Phill Gittins. So that would be the place. So please write to us. We're very interested in having conversations about trying to make this work available to more people across Shropshire. So look forward to hearing from you.
And I will introduce you to Simon Bell as well. I think you guys will have great conversations. Thank you so much for coming on.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
It's not just good work, it's incredible work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a website too, haven't we, Max?
Yes, we have.
We do have a website.
Oh, yes.
I'd like to encourage our listeners to go and take a look there, which we're at www.theshrewsburybiscuitpodcast.co.uk. You can access all of our audio. Does my mic sound weird to you?
No, but it does sound like you've said that before.
I sound very robotic. Check out our website. Our audio is available there. If you don't want to go to Spotify or iTunes or Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts from. And our website is made by our friends at Web Orchard. They are amazing at what they do. So if you need a website, check out Web Orchard. They're brilliant. And this episode was recorded at the Parade Shopping Centre in Shrewsbury. Phil had never been here before today. It's an amazing place to find. There are so many amazing little shops across here. You can find anything from Japanese food to a place to go and paint pottery to go and get your eyelashes extended. You want some eyelash extensions? We got you covered, baby. And a great coffee shop there at the Riverview there with one of the most spectacular views of Shrewsbury you're going to see whilst you're sitting there.
I think you walked in, didn't you, Phil? Wow, I did not know this was here.
Yeah.
What a place.
Make sure you check it out.
It's really cool.
Max, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me once again, Al.
Phil, you've been great. Guys, we will catch you next time. This has been amazing. I really love this. Peace out.